So we're just beginning to reckon with the nightmare that all of us have lived through, and it's impossible to imagine living through it again. But in China, they are living through it again. The government of China has just completely shut down the city of Shanghai. Shanghai is the biggest city in the country. It's one of the largest cities in the world. More than 25 million people live in Shanghai. And the lockdown there is, by all accounts, more brutal and more far-reaching than anything we saw in Wuhan 2 years ago. Watch.
Well, if you think Wuhan 2020 was bad, welcome to Shanghai 2022. This has been like no other lockdown, and it's in the country's cosmopolitan and most affluent financial hub of all places. So this door behind me, this is my exit to the outside alleyway. And late last night, I heard them taping up my door along with the doors of my neighbors. They're placing a paper seal so as to keep it closed. Some buildings with positive cases inside, well, they're locked shut from the outside. They're using bicycle locks and padlocks just to keep people in.
So for once, CNN is not exaggerating. You have 25 million people locked inside their homes. You have the largest prison camp in human history. Anyone who tests positive for COVID is shoved into a van and then taken to a quarantine camp.
Good morning to all of you 4.2 million awakening beauties. You wish for a better world. You want to build a better place for your children to live in. Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching this show. This is the community that we are building. We wish to rip down the old, rotted, cancerous edifices that have come before us, and we want to create something anew, something beautiful, something built in liberty and freedom and the understanding that every human has value. Unfortunately, there are many tides against us, including the most evil tides that have always existed in the world, the master-slave relationship. The relationship between the master and slave is old. It's from the ancients. It's from the Holy Scriptures. There are many conversations about masters and slaves, and this has been the dynamic throughout human history. The Israelites were enslaved by the Egyptians, and so on, and so on, and so on. This is as old as time itself. Evil people attempting to force their will on free human beings and defile God's own nature. One of the prophets of our time. There were many in the Bible, but a prophet of our time is George Orwell. Read 1984. In 1984, George Orwell says that if you wish to see the future, you must merely imagine a foot, a boot, stomping on a human face forever and ever and ever and ever into eternity. He predicted this early on in his writings, far before the internet or the national security states or COVID lockdowns, and he was right. The ruling party, the despotic ruling party in 1984, says this to their subjects: we know that no one ever seizes power with the intention of relinquishing it. Power is not a means, it is an end. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes a revolution in order to establish a dictatorship. The object of persecution is persecution. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power. Now you begin to understand me. George Orwell, 1984. This is the reality of the innocent, metropolitan, well-off, Western, first world population of Shanghai, China today, after 2 weeks of lockdown. Shanghai, China has 28 million people living in it. It is the largest city in China. It has a famous port. There are many international communities in Shanghai. There are hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world who speak different languages and are there for its commerce and financial sectors. Shanghai has 5-star restaurants. Shanghai has fancy apartment buildings, penthouses. If you were wandering the streets of Shanghai, you may think that you were in maybe Manhattan or Chicago. It's a very, very metropolitan and cosmopolitan city. So you would be shocked to find that today Shanghai resembles a simple prison cell where the free people inside of the most populated and metropolitan city in China have been locked away to their deaths. That's right. Shanghai is a dystopian hellscape that George Orwell predicted in 1984. Shanghai is the Great Reset made real, in real time. Imagine going out to your balcony, wherever you live. If you had a little apartment building inside of a large city, many people live in apartments, most people live in apartments in Shanghai, you're having your coffee. You look out, grab your newspaper and look out at the street in front of you. The street is strangely empty. And what do you see traveling towards you? But a literal vision of hell on earth. The dystopian future has come to life. This is not a sci-fi film. This is what people are looking at in Shanghai right now. Watch.
体温，请消毒，少聚众，请通风，科学防疫，文明随行，戴口罩，勤洗手，测体温。
A robotic dog with a megaphone taped to the top of it, telling people to remain in their homes and to follow orders and to resist, we translated this, it's shocking, the need for liberty or freedom. The dog is telling you to deny nature, and in fact it does indeed do just that. That sick robot dog is denying nature, and communism itself denies nature. You are a free individual. You were born that way. You were born with human rights and natural rights. Communism's role in our society is to be a cancer that erodes and destroys those rights and eliminates from your mind any idea that you belong to God, that God even exists, that there's something greater or higher or more beautiful than you, that you are more than just a pile of cells and carbon and various elements from the earth that come up out of the earth and then go back into the earth when your usefulness is over. And the usefulness for the people in Shanghai are indeed over. Hell on earth has arrived at the Chinese prison camp known as Shanghai, the largest prison camp in human history. Shanghai's COVID-19 lockdown leaves residents struggling to access food or medical care. Citizens elsewhere in China fear similar stringent measures will head their way. This from CNN this morning. In the southern city of Zhengzhou, more than 18 million residents face mandatory testing after a handful of infections were found last week. Officials stressed that the food and other supplies were well taken care of. That is not true. Meanwhile, online posts and articles are preparing for outbreaks of circulated Chinese media, including tips on how to store vegetables and what to prepare for in the quarantine. Chinese media is trying to lock down the information that is getting out via social media of what the world's largest prison camp looks like. Now, was there an outbreak of COVID-19? Well, I got to be honest with you, we don't really take communist propaganda media sources at face value. We will never fully know where COVID-19 comes from. We will never know the lab cultures of COVID-19 and their origins, of which the nation of China certainly had a hand in developing. We will never know because the Chinese government locks that information down. They have been untrustworthy, they are liars, and they lie for their own power. It's fair to say that when you hear a report out of China, it has been fully manipulated in order to increase the power of the Chinese government and the Communist Party. What we do know is the results of these policies. If you are found positive for COVID in China, you are immediately removed from your home. If you are not found positive for COVID, you are locked inside your home. Nevertheless, you are not allowed to quarantine in your home. You are stripped of your rights that we enjoy in this country, rights to speak freely, move freely, assemble freely, worship freely. These very basic things are not non-existent in China. Human rights are non-existent in China. And ladies and gentlemen, this is what it's all about. This is the Great Reset in action. They wish to be able to control you like a slave. They want you to know that they are indeed the masters and you are indeed the slaves. Slaves locked up inside of their homes for weeks on end with no food and no medical care, screaming from their balconies inside of Shanghai. The noise is horrifying. They don't want you to see this. Watch.
这个是这个人的叫啊，好了，终于200人，所有人都在叫。 要明了，就刚刚5分钟前头，俺。
So what happens when people leave their houses, when they break their government quarantine? And by the way, the government has sent the army in to enact this quarantine in Shanghai. The Chinese People's Communist Army has been deployed to the streets in order to bring people's freedom to heel. Just in case you're wondering, if it can't happen here, it could happen here. Your leaders and the structure of our government matters. What happens if you leave quarantine? We have footage. This is a Chinese man starving, went out to look for food. Watch. Beaten like they would beat a prisoner who tried to escape a prison camp. What is this doing to people who have just at the beginning of this month were living free and able to move about and living inside of a generally Western and metropolitan area? It's causing human break. People in China do not go on long rants against the government. It's illegal. People in China don't riot. People in China don't protest against the government for fear. Not that they don't have a desire for freedom like you and I. They have fear of the repercussions of what happens, how quickly you get disappeared if you dare violate the sacrosanct relationship between you and the government masters of your life. People are beginning to break in China. Watch.
你知道不知道？你告诉我超市不开门，我买什么？我吃什么？我喝什么？你把人逼死了！我不多吃，我住不多，我身份证实惠的，我实惠是我父母给你们封了2个月，这2个月他们怎么过的？我的外婆独居老人，没有人照顾，你把我们封着。
A man screaming out against the Communist Party in the streets, saying that his relatives are dying in their apartments, that his family is starving, and communism isn't there. That's right. Communism isn't there. There are structures inside of our country and inside of countries around this world that are far too big for a centralized government to take care of. The government is not God. People are not God. God is God. And that is why in this country, the federal government should have the least amount of power. More power should trickle into your state governments, and the most amount of power should be inside of the community where you live. Your mayor, your county councilman, your church. That's where the power should reside. Those are the people who should care for you. And inside of that type of a diffused power system, you can really take care of people. If you wait for a government in a far-off land to take care of millions of people that they have locked down, it won't work. Do you know they're throwing out mountains of food while people are starving inside of Shanghai? Why? Because the food is COVID-19 positive. We're not joking. We read Chinese official state media. Official state media has declared that various fruits, vegetables, and breads inside of the marketplaces all contracted COVID-19. This is real. They're saying that the children who contract COVID-19 must be separated from your parents. Are you paying attention yet? Are you watching the child separation policy happening here in this country? They must remove the children from their parents in order to diffuse the bonds between child and mother and father, the strongest bond that exists on planet Earth, because it is a holy bond. You have welcomed and created a soul when you become a parent, a father, a mother. You know that this is a spiritual moment. Have you had a child? Have you welcomed a child into this earth? Did you wipe the tears from your eyes? Were you prepared for that moment? Of course you weren't, because it is a spiritual moment. That moment binds you for life. It changes you. The government knows this, and the government in China sees it as a threat to their power, much as the government in America sees the relationship between a parent and a mother and a father with their child and the value system created there as a threat to them. Are you paying attention? Is it making sense yet? Children being tied up inside of hazmat suits and paraded through the streets in China separate from their parents. Watch. Where is this child being taken? We have footage of the quarantine camps. In case you were wondering, a prison cell in America is probably preferable to the quarantine camps inside of China. People are being treated like cattle. And I think that's actually the point here, is to treat people like livestock, to let them know that you have the same amount of value as an animal on the street. We view you as the same motility as pieces of meat that can be done away with and locked up like chattel. Look.
非常非常可怜，这种是连床都还没有支起来的，人家就直接睡地上了。这个已经不是贫民窟了。
This is not where illegal migrants who cross the border and now have to have the government house them sleep. In fact, even in our country, when a legal migrant crosses the border, they are not kept in conditions like that. Those are tax-paying citizens who may be financial advisors for major banks or may be members of society in a fashion design or a shopkeeper or a barista one day, and then you are locked up like a cow ready for the slaughter the next day. Slaughtering is what's happening in China. There is so much footage that we can't show you. It drives us insane because it's real. But ladies and gentlemen, not only is this a family show, but it's also a show that needs to remain online and in compliance with policies for graphic content and so on as it pertains to the social media that we broadcast on. So we cannot violate those rules, and we cannot show you the horrific human disaster that this is creating, including the extreme rates of depression, anxiety, rage, fury, and death. Yes, indeed, suicide in Shanghai is skyrocketing. Not that you would ever be able to see the official numbers there. The imagery is horrifying, and we indeed do believe in human rights on this channel, and so we pray for those in Shanghai. What is happening is evil. It's against nature. It's against God's design. It is our cats that have been rounded up from the apartments of people who have been quarantined, ready for execution. This we can show you. It contains no necessarily graphic content, although it is indeed evil. Do you have a family pet? I certainly grew up with a Labrador who was my pride and joy and my best friend for a lot of tough days in middle school and high school. Grow up with a pet, you love them, you care for them, and quite frankly, they're a part of your family. We buried our dog, our Labrador, Dutch, on our property. This was a member of our home, a member of our family. And there's a spark that you connect with an animal that makes that relationship very special. The Chinese government is severing that relationship and murdering those animals. There are multiple images across Chinese social media, which we have been scouring, showing death squads essentially wandering the streets, assassinating animals, assassinating domesticated pets, not strays, because they all have COVID-19. They are slaughtering their own civilians, their own pets, and their own food supply in order to protect it from COVID-19. Do you understand what is happening now? Are you seeing the reality that they wish to create? Once more, this is the image of a perfect domesticated pet that the Communist Party of China wishes to see roaming the streets of Shanghai. Let's see that creepy robot dog again.
体温，勤消毒，少聚众，勤通风，科学防疫，文明随行。戴口罩，勤洗手，测体温。
Why is this a perfect pet in China? Because it is a robot, because it can be controlled stem to stem, end to end, by the communist Chinese, it will do what it's told. That is what this system is intended to create. It is intended to scare the citizens of Shanghai, scare a population into submission, into knowing that they are the slaves and that we are the master. It is perverse, it's evil. You may recall that the Chinese government has often and regularly led to the slaughter of its own people. The Great Leap Forward in the 1960s and 70s by Mao Zedong led to the slaughter of an estimated 60 million Chinese inside of that nation. They have never cared about its people. It's never about you. It is only ever about the feeding of their own power. And it's why you should be terrified that the people inside of our own medical establishment, in our own community, and our own politics admire the Chinese. There's footage of Justin Trudeau saying he admires the Chinese model. Joe Biden and his family are inextricably struck through with complete and total compromised asset liability with the Communist Party of China. We have been covering that nonstop on this show. Every single day we bring you a report on Hunter Biden's laptop, and we're very excited to say that we will be doing an interview later with Miranda Devine, the author of The Laptop from Hell, and we're going to do a deep dive on exactly what this laptop contains. What it does contain, that has been verified in dozens of news outlets and reports, is the relationship between the Biden family and the Communist Chinese. The Biden family sought to profit off of these evil people, and in fact, they admire them. Hunter Biden even represented in a court of law through legal filings one of the worst communist Chinese, an arms dealer who was working on establishing fiat states for communist China throughout Africa through illegal arms deals. That man, named Fat Ping, is in jail now, charged by our government for this type of illicit activity. Absent from the charging documents was the name Hunter Biden. Strange that. Must be really nice. Hunter Biden and the Biden family utterly and completely criminally shot through with their relations and connections to communist China. They admire this system. They wish to bring this system here. Power for the sake of power. Torture for the sake of torture. Persecution for the sake of persecution. You must know who is in charge. And the Biden regime has attempted at every step of the way to strip you of your rights in a manner that Communist China is now attempting to strip their own people of their rights. There's a couple things that's stopping them from doing it. Praise the Lord, we have courts of law in this country that would strike down Joe Biden's vaccine mandate. We have a Second Amendment. And we have an educated populace, which is why we do this show every single day. Let's jump down into exactly how quickly they wish to bring back COVID lockdowns, because indeed, the COVID lockdowns were extremely beneficial to the Democrat Party and the power establishments and elites inside of this country. All you need to do is look at the 2020 election results to realize exactly how compatible COVID-19 pandemic and pandemic restrictions, permanent mail-in voting, and the emergency powers granted unto themselves, like kings and princes on this earth, like godlike powers, exactly how abused those powers were and how wonderful they were for the most evil people on the planet. White House COVID advisor Dr. Jia says that extending the mask mandate on public transportation is absolutely on the table. Here from Breitbart.com. Jia told NBC News today that although the new variants spreading are leading to low hospitalization numbers, that they are still of concern, and he said that extending the mandate was ultimately a CDC decision, but he says that he wants to extend the flight mask mandate and public transportation masking mandate. Look, this is a CDC decision, Jia said on the clip, but he said, I think that it's absolutely on the table. The mask mandate is supposed to be lifted actually this week or next week on the 18th of April in a matter of days. So they can't even let go of that. Have you flown recently? My father flew in just last night. He had a mask on at the airport. Of course, you have to. You'll get screamed at or yelled at. There's signs everywhere. You can be removed and put on a no-fly list, like a terrorist if you do not wear your mask on an airplane. It is like a Fauciite dystopian hellscape that still exists in the sky above us at 30,000 feet. Why the hell this is still a thing is beyond me other than power for absolute power. George Orwell nailed it. They can contribute to their mastery over you, the slave, by forcing you to do something. Dr. Walensky is going to make her decision based on the framework that the CDC scientists create, and we'll have that decision collectively based on that. Is there any place on earth that has lost more integrity and more faith from the American people than the Centers for Disease Control and these scum who are the medical elite inside of our nation? Look at what the medical elite inside of China have done, and you will see precisely the image of the future that they wish to bring here. The medical elite in China have a zero COVID policy. What that is a zero freedom policy. And you're beginning to see that play out. The White House has defended emotional Kamala Harris from removing her mask indoors despite close contact with coronavirus. So let this be known that illegal criminal migrants can wander into this country without a vaccine, but the Biden administration wished to force you to have a vaccine in order to work and provide for your family, in order to care for your children, in order to keep your job. You must have a vaccine. There is no vaccine mandate at the border. The Biden administration is open to continuing mask mandates to travel in federal transportation, yet Kamala Harris can defy CDC guidelines because she is emotional. This from Breitbart.com. The White House defended Kamala Harris on Monday after she was caught not wearing a mask indoors with newly confirmed Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. White House press secretary defended Harris, saying that she was not wearing a mask indoors and that she did have close contact with staffers who tested positive for COVID-19, but she was emotional. It was an emotional day, Psaki said. It was a historic day. There were moments that she was not wearing a mask inside. Rules for me, not for thee. This is about punishing you. Watch.
That the vice president was masked indoors all day, but the White House tweeted a video showing her standing over the president without a mask on. Can you explain what happened there?
Well, I would say that the vice president and the president and all of us abide by what the CDC protocols are. It was an emotional day. It was a historic day. And there were moments when she was not wearing a mask inside, including in a photo, but she was wearing it 99.9% of the time.
It's not just at the White House. The elites and the scum who run this country and wish to enslave you merely want to extract pain. They need you to know that you are subservient to them. This is happening in New York City. Now, we will note that in New York, there was a horrific attack on a subway. We are waiting for details to come out on that, and we pray for those who were harmed by the attack as people begin to break and as the threads of society begin to fray, and as soft on crime, defund the police policies begin to mount in America's largest, most populous, most diverse city. Certainly, there will be horrifying things that happen. We pray for all of the victims. Those victims have been many over the last few months of Democrat and communist control in New York City. We encourage you to get out of the cities. My family got out of the heart of Washington, D.C. after we saw the ravages that occurred after the BLM and Antifa riots, along with defunding the police. Mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, accused of scaremongering by claiming COVID is hospitalizing kids as he tries to defend masking 5-year-olds. This according to the Daily Mail. New York Mayor Eric Adams is under fire for keeping no COVID-19 mandates in place for young children. Adams agreed to lift the mask rule for under 5s on April 4th, but canceled the plan on April 1st as cases began to increase. He defended the decision in a segment on Politics Sunday, a show. The mayor says, I got to really balance this out. I don't want to look in the rearview mirror later in life and say I made the wrong decision for our babies. Isn't it amazing that the people who claim to protect the children the very, very most are the ones who are attacking the children the very most through all manner of evil, whether that be abortion or whether that be grooming or whether that be the sickening practices that have been happening inside of our school systems and inside of the happiest places on earth, Disney World, which exists about an hour from here. Yeah. place that my family will never, ever go to again. They always claim that it's for the protection of the children, and ladies and gentlemen, they never, ever actually protect the kids. We had a Disney whistleblower on this program. Thank you for watching. If you watched, great. Hundreds of thousands of people watched our Disney whistleblower tell us that Disney does absolutely nothing as it pertains to internal policy against the child sex traffickers and predators among their own ranks. Disney has a horrible problem hiring child sex traffickers and predators. They have a long and established history of having those types of monsters work in their ranks at Disney, and there has been no internal guidance on that. But there's plenty of internal languishing and struggle sessions that are happening with Disney corporate over the Parental Rights and Education Bill. Sickening, sickening company. Never spend another dime with Disney. But here is Eric Adams wrapping himself inside of the flag of defending the children. Isn't that remarkable? Doctors say that the mayor should be removed from office for continuing to push the mandate. This is bad, and it's going to backfire. Parents are pissed at this, and you want to upset the sleeping monster in this nation, the sleeping giant. It is the parents. Parents are able to flip states like Virginia red, crumple up school boards like a tinfoil ball, and throw them away. And that happened all across the country in elections last week. We're going to do a special on them and bring you all the incredible results. We're doing the research on that right now. We will not comply. Backlash as Philadelphia reinstates indoor mask mandate as stealth variant fuels rise in cases. Critics say it's tyranny. Philadelphia, blue city forever. The only reasons that Democrats ever win in Pennsylvania is the corruption and rot inside of Philadelphia. So sick because that city has a wonderful and colonial history, and it is an incredible crown jewel of the American founding and revolution. And now it is being used as essentially its own destitution camp for Chinese communist models of lockdowns and maskings and violation of freedom and human rights. Really a perverse thing happening inside of Philadelphia. The Daily Mail reports Philadelphia is reinstating its indoor mask mandate starting next week, only a month after lifting it. Did you ever think that they were going to give up power? The only way they'll give up power is when we rip the power from them. Take these people out of office. That's when it'll stick. Cases in the city have slightly risen in the past few weeks, nowhere near enough to consider it a surge. The BA2 stealth variant is blamed for the rising cases in Philadelphia and across America. The decision was made because of a recent uptick in cases, though federal officials no longer consider cases to be the most reliable metric for COVID risk. According to the CDC, Philadelphia County, which includes the city, is one of the 95% of counties considered to have low COVID risk. Yet they are bringing back the mask mandates anyway because it was never about anything other than your personal obedience to them as the master. Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert, said that this week Americans should decide for themselves how they wish to deal with the pandemic going forward based on the amount of risk that they are willing to accept. Dr. Fauci admitting that the sky is blue, that the sun is hot, that water is wet, and that he is short. Dr. Fauci, if you've seen him in real life, I was inside of a room with Dr. Fauci during some of those Trump briefings, some of those White House briefings. Dr. Fauci is indeed the height of an elf on a shelf during Christmas time. Very, very short little man, very sad little man, very repugnant little man. And it's always those sad, short, cretinous people that ruin society. Man. Failed COVID lockdowns hurt Americans more than helped Americans by crushing jobs and education without saving lives, writes Stephen Moore, co-author of a new study comparing state-by-state pandemic policies. This is really, really shocking stuff here, also from the Daily Mail, stating that the states like Florida and Texas and Utah that did not do COVID lockdowns fared far, far better. The image on your screen will show you that these states are red states that did the best inside of the South, the Midwest, and the upper Northwest. These states did much better. These states are the freest states in the country. You can see sort of what they used to call the Bible Belt there as positive data for COVID. Let's read the report. Americans cannot return to lockdown policies for no other reason than they hurt people more than they helped. And now we have the data to prove it. Our comprehensive COVID performance index of 50 states and Washington, D.C. analyzed the results of government policies across the country to determine what worked and what did not. Our bottom line conclusion, the strictest economic and societal breakdown did not save lives, but they have severe consequences. We ranked each state by 3 metrics in this study: the economy, unemployment and economic output; education, days missed school by school children; and mortality, COVID death rate adjusted for age. We assign letter grades to each state based on their combined score performance based on 3 metrics. The full results are published in the National Bureau of Economic Research. Red states fared far better than blue states, although there were some exceptions, such as Vermont, where everyone pretty much in Vermont just sits inside of a cabin anyway all day, sips hot cocoa, and stares out the window dreaming about communism. And Arizona, a red state, which did rank poorly, probably because of the number of Californians traveling to it to escape lockdowns. I work out of Phoenix often with Turning Point USA. Let me tell you, the state is being overrun and deluged by disaffected Californians. Please do not vote the same way. Please do not vote. Bring your voting habits with you. Everyone's happy to have more patriots in their state, not more communists. Overall, the picture is clear. The poorest performing states opted for heavy-handed lockdowns and wreaked havoc on local communities while suffering very high death rates. Utah, Nevada, Vermont, Montana, South Dakota, and Florida, the state that was often pillared by the media when the beaches were opened, had the best records of keeping their citizens safe. Well, what do you know? And keeping their schools open and their businesses open and their workers fully employed. Those states received an A. I am in a state that receives an A. A. The opposite side of the scale, where New Jersey, New York, Mexico, and Illinois. School children in these low-ranking states also suffered the largest educational losses. Those states received an F. California and Florida may represent the clearest comparisons. California receiving an F and Florida receiving an A. Stay the hell out of Florida. There are some blue state people moving to Florida, including my mother and father, and we're very, very excited about that. We are very excited to be having our newborn this week, hopefully, fingers crossed, my wife and I, and we will be welcoming one more happy, free child to the state of Florida. We are thrilled about this, and my parents are down here on baby watch visiting us, and they have moved from the hellhole of Illinois into the free state of Florida. Why would you live inside of tyranny? Why would you live inside of a place that models itself after China? They want to do this to you. The goal is the eradication of your civil rights and your human liberties. The reason for this is that you must know their power. If they are not exercising their power over you, then they have nothing. These people have nothing. They have no souls. They have no God. They have no religion. They have no families. They have no happiness, and they have no lives. They're empty shells of people. I've lived and worked in Washington, D.C. around our political class and our political elites for the last 15 years. These people are cretinous. They would sell their own grandmother up the river for an extra dime. They do not have anything to offer the world. They've never built anything or done anything. They merely wish for power. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we mustn't allow those people to have power. Let's strip them of the only thing that they desire on this earth, and let's leave them to live inside of their own little cell blocks that they lock themselves into. You know what? If you want to lock down, if you want a triple mask, my wife and I were at Trader Joe's this weekend. There was a dude in like a full hazmat suit at Trader Joe's. I used to want to take videos and photos of these people and dunk on them, but honestly, I view them as sad, broken people. People who would wish to live under the control of daddy in communist China. People who would wish to live under the boot of government, as Orwell says, a boot stamping on their faces. They want it. It's perverse, it's weird, it's broken thinking, it's not natural, but there's a lot of unnatural things going on right now. But we on this show support the natural. We have our priorities in order. We support God, family, and country. We order our lives in order to create a great awakening. The great awakening is upon us. We know that the way to embrace true flourishing in humanity is through freedom and more liberty and more capacity to live the life that you were designed to live by God. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that is why we know that we were born free on this show, and we intend to stay that way. Thank you for watching today. My name is Benny Johnson, and this is The Benny Show.